Hello, I'm gonna walk you through how you can create your own Lemmy instance. The first thing you want to do is to come up with your instance name. So my Lemmy instance name, and look it up in a domain registrar. In this case I'm using Namecheap, but there are many others available. You will see that several different extensions are available. The XYZ extension in this case is the cheapest. It would cost you about €1 to have the domain name for 1 year, and afterwards, if you choose to keep it, the price would go up to about €10 per year. I already registered a domain for this tutorial, which is lemx.xyz. So I would like the person to put lemx.xyz into the browser and find my instance. The next thing that you need is to rent a cloud server. I'm using serverspace.io for this. There are different types of servers that you can create, but I'm gonna choose vStack Cloud, create server, Ubuntu version 20.04. I'll set Amsterdam as data center, 1 GB of RAM, 30, and the server name Lemix. So this configuration would cost €4.55 per month. I would have 1 GB of RAM, 1 CPU, 30 GB of SSD, and reasonable network connection. I recommend you to start with something small like this, and if later on your instance grows and people are uploading too many images, you can always increase that. Now it's created, we have an IP address, the root login, and the password. To log in, you're gonna need a terminal, or if you're on Windows, you can use PuTTY, and we SSH root at IP. Yes. Copy the password, paste, and now we are logged into the server. When we log in, the first thing we will do is to update and upgrade the package manager. What this means is that we are going to update the sources from which ATP gets the packages, and we will also update all of the programs that are already installed by default to their latest versions. This can take a few minutes, so while that's happening, we can go back to the control panel for our domain, in this case at Namecheap, and we're going to go to manage, find the DNS settings, in this case it's advanced DNS, and we are not going to need delete record and delete record, and we are going to create new A records. The first A record is going to be at, and it will redirect to our server's IP address. We will add a new record, www, and it will also go to our IP address. What this means is that when someone puts lemx.xyz or www.lemx.xyz, the browser will be redirected to our server's IP address, and later on we will configure how the server will handle this connection. If we go back, progress is at 65%. I don't want to speed up the video so that you can see how long this should take, but if you jump about 1 minute ahead, this should be over. Here we hit enter. Now the next thing I'm going to install is Vim, which is a text editor for the terminal, and I'll use this to modify configuration files later on. You can also use Nano or your favorite text editor. Progress is at 99%. And okay, so now I install Vim. Now we also want to install Docker and Docker Compose, which we will use later on to install the actual Lemmy instance itself. Since it is not available by default from the apt package manager, we need to add Docker as a source from which we can download this program. To do that, we first need to install the programs that allow us to ensure that Docker is a source that we can trust. We will get the public keys directly from the website docker.com, and then we will add Docker as a source to the apt manager and use Docker's public key to confirm that it really is Docker where we are downloading things from. We update the apt, and now we are able to run this install command. Now this will install Docker, but we also need Docker Compose, which we can install directly from Docker's GitHub. The current latest release is version 2.2.2. You can access this website to find out what the newest version is. In general, downloading a newer version can be safe, but sometimes newer versions can break things that were built for older versions. So take some care with that. With this command, we have downloaded the program, Docker Compose, and installed it at the bin folder where we have the executables. If we try to run it now, it's going to fail because the way we installed the program does not give it executable permissions. With this command, we give it the permissions to be executed. So now you can execute Docker Compose. Another program that we need is Nginx. Nginx will handle the connection between the browser and our server. When you install Nginx, or if you try to do systemctl status Nginx, you will, if you see this type of error, there's a socket error because this address family is not supported by the protocol, and you see this bracket, double dot bracket. What this means is that the default server configuration is trying to set your server to listen at an IPv6 address as well as the IPv4 address. This server does not have an IPv6 address, so we need to change this from the default configuration. If we go to etc nginx, now in this folder is where we have the Nginx configuration. This is the Nginx configuration file. If we look at it, you can see that this file includes everything that is in sites enabled. If you go to sites enabled, you will see that we have a default server configuration. this default server configuration is listening here at this IPv6 type address, which we don't have. We comment it, and now we try system ctl start nginx. Oops, sorry. If you now check the status, you will see that it's active and running. At this point, if the DNS records have had enough time to become updated, we should be able, using our browser, to go to our domain name. Perfect. So welcome to Nginx. This means that Nginx is configured properly and that the DNS records have been updated. If you're using a VPN when you try to access, I've noticed that sometimes it can take longer to update this DNS record. Now that we have Nginx, we can skip this. This document will be available in the description, by the way. We also need to install certbot. To do so, since it is not available in the apt package manager, we need to install a different package manager called snap. So that's the first thing that I do. What certbot does is that it allows us to create SSL certificates, and these SSL certificates then allow us to connect via HTTPS. So what it does is that it will create, for example, somewhere in your server a secret file, and then it will check if it can access that secret file through the domain name. If it can, then it knows that this domain name really is associated with this server, and then it will generate these SSL keys for you. Now, the first time that I run certbot, I like to run it as a dry run. What this means is that it will not generate the certificates. It will only test if it's possible. And it's good to do this because if the run fails a few times, then it won't allow you to try again for a while. Let's change this to Lemmy and Lemmy. And this is almost fully installed. Oh, and the Nginx option means that it will use Nginx to serve this secret file. Now I'm trying, it asks me for my email, lemxyc@protonmail.com. I agree. Now it's trying to simulate the certificate request for both Lemmy and www.lemmy. It was successful. So now we can do it again, but this time we are serious. So we remove the dry run. lemxyc@protonmail.com. I agree. Sure. Now I want to hear more about the Electronic Frontier Foundation. You can, of course, select no to this option. Perfect. So it worked, and it generated the private keys and the information necessary to have the HTTPS encrypted connection at this folder. etc let's encrypt live lemx.xyz. Okay, so now the server is configured. What we need to do is to now configure the connection specifically for Lemmy. in Lemmy's GitHub, they have an example configuration. So I am going to copy their example configuration, and I am renaming it to lemmy.conf. We open. If you had the problem when installing Nginx because of the IPv6 connection, then we have to comment this line and this line. Otherwise, again, you will have an error. Then you need to replace all of the bracketed variables, full variable including the brackets. So domain gets replaced by lemix.xyz. Here are our SSL certificates at lemix.xyz. The ports, so the user interface port, here we can see them. So user interface port is 1235, and Lemmy port, that is 8536, another Lemmy port 8536, and I believe there is another, here it is, Lemmy port. Ooh. All right. There we go. 8536. And with this, the Nginx configuration is ready. We can now try system control restart Nginx. Okay. I believe I may have missed, oh yeah, so I missed this variable, domain, haha, lemix.xyz, and now it works. So here I have also added a command to replace the variables automatically. If you use this command, you would only have to comment out these lines if you had the IPv6 error. Now that this Nginx configuration is ready, we need to create a folder that will hold our instance. The default is to go to var www, and here we can create the folder. In this case, I'm calling it Lemix. In this folder, we are going to need to download these files. One is a configuration file that comes from Lemmy's GitHub. The other is the Docker file, also from Lemmy's GitHub, which contains the instructions for Docker to build the Lemmy image. We get them with wget. Now we have these two. We also need to create a folder that will contain the database as well as the files uploaded by your users. And this pictures folder, we need to change the ownership to 991. This is so that users have access to this folder so that they can upload images and download images. Now we have to change some configuration in these files. If we open the Docker compose file, we have the database settings. In this case, we can change the database password to password 123. Here we have the images that are being installed. For example, now the newest version available is 14.5, so you would be able to change it here if an update comes around. you would perhaps go 14.6. Now I'm going to leave it at 14.3 because that is the what the GitHub production file tells us to do. If you change this version, you would also have to change this version. Another thing, so this is the interface of Lemmy, and this is Lemmy, the backend. Now, you also want to change the external host from localhost to your actual domain. This is the user of pictures. That's why we had to change the ownership. And yeah, that's all you have to do. So password, host. Then we open this second file. This is the configuration file. You can customize your admin. You need a password. Make sure that it's at least 10 digits long. Site name, Lemix. Domain, lemix.xyz. Remember, if you changed any of the Postgres database values, make sure you change them here too. So I set password to password123. There is a slur filter. If there's any words that you would like to completely filter out of your instance, you can add those words here. If you don't want to filter any words, you can comment it out. In this case, I will leave the slur filter as it is. And you probably want to enable federation. Federation is what allows you to communicate with other instances. If you want to do that, then you would add this federation block. If you leave it like this, then your federation is completely open and you can interact with any other instance that allows you to interact with them. If you would like to have more control over the federation, you can look for the documentation in the document that I'm going to post, and there you can see how to control federation. And now everything should be set up now. If we do docker compose op d and we run that, so now docker compose is going to build all of these different images or containers, I believe they are called, from the Docker website. If, for example, you wanted to make changes to the user interface, that would mean making changes to the Lemmy UI, you would download the source from GitHub, do the modifications on that file, create a Docker image, and then on this Docker compose file, instead of pointing at the Docker image on the website, you would point to your own custom Docker image. If there's any interest, I can make a small tutorial about that afterwards. Now it's building the containers, and it's almost done. Okay. If you have any questions about any of this, you can leave me a comment, or you can go and post on lemmy.ml. Now it has started. Let's go back to lemx.xyz, and there it is, our own instance. You can log in as an administration and customize it further. If we go to the first post on Lemmy, we can look it up. Sometimes you have to look it up twice for it to work, but now we have it, right? If we go back to our homepage and click all, we can see now that federation is enabled. And yeah, I hope that this tutorial has been clear enough and that you find it useful. Have a nice day.